Hi, hello everyone. That was great, I guess. My name is John Cutler. I work at a company called Pendo. We are actually a sponsor of this. I did have to pitch my talk, just like everyone else. This is great coming off of Jim's conversation, Jim Semnick, who was just here, because the company I work for aside, part of my job has been to finally get my absolute product nerd fantasy, which is to talk to 100, pretty much 5 product teams a day, 3 product teams a day. I'm on with some of our sales folks talking to prospects, and I annoy them because I ask the other questions that they don't ask, and we also talk to people. So what's been awesome for me about this role is, for the first time, I've been on product teams, and we've talked about data, or we've talked about these things, and we would develop our own points of view, but this has given me the N, right? This has given me the sample across many teams to really dig into what works, the challenges people are having. So one thing is for certain, I'm not going to be talking from a technical level about data or statistics. I'm actually going to be talking about the human side of working with information and learning on your teams, because that's, in the process of doing this, that's what I've learned it's actually really about. I say to the sales folks at our company, the blocker for our product has nothing to do with our product, it's the cultures inside the company. And how do we tap into that? So that's the why of this particular talk, is basically I'm a curious product person, probably like everyone, and I had this opportunity to talk to lots of teams about it, something that I've never done before. So I've zeroed in on like a couple of themes that kept springing up again and again. One is the why of even thinking about data in the first place. Trust issues actually falls right up at the top, and I'll get into that. The learning aspect of it, ritual around learning in companies, the access to information in your companies, what action, what's the what now, what's the decision you're making with this stuff, and then safety. And I'll finish with safety because it's important, because along with trust, if your team doesn't have safety and trust, it's actually, Marty sort of alluded to this in his talk, it's pretty difficult to do anything, really, without safety and trust on your particular team. So I'm also going to read a bunch of quotes, because I actually just lifted these straight out of interviews. And I think it sets up each of the themes really well, and it might be annoying me reading the quotes, but we'll just get into it. So when we talked about the why, these were some of the ones that rose to the top. They're very interesting to me. If Google is doing it, then we should be doing it right. Like, we should be doing it. This was a customer interview. I actually had to give a training to 15 of their PMs, and someone took me to the side and said, the VP got us together one day and told us that we needed to become more data-driven. Our features are going to be measured now. It's very stressful for them, and that was interesting to hear. This was an engineer. I have no idea whether the work we're doing is actually having an impact, whether it really makes a difference. I'm getting discouraged, actually. People say it does, but I don't see it. We're just throwing spaghetti at the wall right now. So that was, after that, they did actually say, but I still have awesome problems to solve, so it's no big deal. So it sounds dramatic, but they followed it up with something else. The final one is a very no drama response. We just have more information at our fingertips. We build better products. It's just another skill set and tool. No drama. There was no drama about anything in that particular statement. So on each of these slides, I'm going to list some of the obstacles that came up in these particular conversations, and then some of the catalysts, some of the things that you can do to push through on the particular goal in this case. So this theme is the why. So as we alluded to in the first quote, one of the big ones is just keeping up with the Joneses. Literally, in a lot of the customers that I talk to, they're looking at products just because they think they have to. Like, no one actually can explain it other than some platitude about, well, of course you have to use data. You have to use data, right? And that's very interesting, the number of people who start. When you're digging into the why, to Jim's comment about the questions, it comes up and again, well, we just have to keep up with people, right? It's just what you would do. The second obstacle that comes up is that people are engaged in some massive alignment scheme. And I'm into OKRs, and it's interesting. It is results, it's not actions, right? You're looking at particular results. But the data has been actually foisted upon the team as a way to line every single person up, so that someone's mind map or someone's tree of the organization can fit perfectly with each other. And while that can be positive in some cases, for a lot of people, that alignment really takes the wind out of the sails of the teams when they're talking about particular data. It's just purely to measure them and their output. And the final one, which is interesting, I have worked with some people who are in this room, but their concept of data was a tiebreaker. They had the best idea should win. It's a very Google-centric idea. And the best idea should win. I'm not sure I really trust your particular idea. We are going to settle this tie once and for all, and the data will show everything, of course, right? And that actually comes up a lot in low-trust environments. They're literally looking for a tiebreaker. And this is very much in line with what Marty spoke about earlier, but the catalysts for these things, the teams that are doing well working with data don't mention data initially in these interviews. They mention customer outcomes. They mention the passion that they have for customer outcomes. And along that, they care for a sense of impact. So the engineer in this particular case, engineers is very interesting. An engineer has a lot of cool problems to solve. They can pretty much check out on the why if you've got foosball and if you've got good options in your company and good things like that. You can kind of check out. And you have still awesome problems to solve. You do that. But in this case, someone wanted that sense of impact. And so the organizations that bubble up the impact that the work is creating, it has a profound effect on how they use the information to be able to achieve those outcomes. It's very interesting. And the other aspect is, it's the why that they cite is not this linear, and I'll speak to this later, not this linear, we're going to figure out the exact problem with the data, and we're going to execute. Figure it out, execute. We even heard that earlier on today. It's a hard thing not to say when you have these conversations. We're going to figure out the problem, then we're going to execute. It's all about execution right now, of course. It's all about execution right now. The teams that are working well have this, I call it probe and listen, which is they're creating small little experiments, small little impulses into the system that is their product, and listening and moving back and forth. So when you hear them talking about how they use data, it's not in a unidirectional way. It's coming from the customers, it's coming back, it's coming from the team. So those are three of the catalysts that seem to bubble up in the particular teams that are doing that. For all this to happen, trust, in my experience, is the core issue to using information of any kind. And again, I speak to Jim's talk. I've been in conversations where you can go to a team and say, for real, I spent 90 minutes talking to this customer. I tried the best techniques I could to ask these particular questions. And the person will say, I just don't trust you. That feels biased. If they were as open as that would probably be a high trust environment. Probably they just walk away. And they do that. So some of the quotes, I'm just not sure I trust the team to act on the data appropriately. What about nuance? What about my particular experience? So that was a product owner. Some people have said it straight up to me when I actually asked them the question. Just to be blunt, I don't trust her. We talk about being a team, but it's always about her ideas and her intuition. My intuition matters too, right? And that is a very sticky topic, right? I mean, they're talking about trust, but they're talking about that their ideas and their intuition don't have equal footing. And you hear this come up a lot in discussions about data. I talked about the tiebreaker situation. You hear people talking incessantly about breaking the ties. Someone will say, I've heard a PM just the other day was talking to me, well, they just don't trust my intuition. They don't trust it. So this issue comes a lot. And then the final one is, again, I love the no drama responses because they tell you about when things are working. I know we all have the best intentions. Of course, I get nervous and sometimes out of my comfort zone, but I know we're together on this. And I know that must seem like an awkward thing to discuss. We're here to talk about data. But in a lot of times, you're using data for experiments in your organization, interpreting data. There's a million, as someone who uses data a lot, I can pretty much spin the data to say whatever I want to say, in general. And there's an up and to the rightism for product people that they cherry pick, which is one of the obstacles. You cherry pick the data that's to be able to make your particular case at the thing. So one of the big obstacles is you have low trust environments when there's a lot of fear of the unknown. People begin to become a little bit scared at that point, and they begin to not necessarily trust those around them. And one of the ones that comes up a lot as an obstacle is that someone, often on an engineering team, is saying, intuition has absolutely no place in this situation, or intuition sucks. And so those three obstacles have a pretty profound effect on the trust that you have with your particular team. The catalysts, when I would talk to teams who are being successful, and I'm thinking about Marty's talk where he talked about, there's 5 companies that are kicking ass, and if you could just be like them, your company could be awesome too. So I'm not saying this in any kind of elitist way. I'm just saying the people who appear to be doing a little better job at this would just try things with data. They would try to answer a question with that. The team would come together and do that. They would have data quality, and that's something I'm not going to get into a lot of the technical side of it, but a lot of the low trust that happens around data is data quality. All it takes is to be in one meeting where you're presenting and your numbers were off slightly. Again, there's people in this room who I've produced these reports for, so like Ronnie, and we're looking at the particular report, and we get to the one column at the end, and he's like, there's no way. There's no way that happened. That was a high trust environment that we could back up from that situation. I could go and do an analysis, right? So part of it is data quality is very interesting in that sense that it drives trust. So that's one thing as a catalyst in your organization, is try to invest in the quality of your data, cleaning the particular bits of data you have, normalizing the data you have. That's probably the only technical data thing I'm going to talk about, but it has a profound element on the trust in your organization. And then the final thing is making this a full team activity. And it's a theme you've heard throughout, but as someone who was told to go away and run some reports and then come back and tell everyone about it, that had far less impact when the team was involved with me as an analyst. In that case, I was maybe a UX researcher in product roles. When it was a full team activity, that had a profound boost on the trust that you had in this. So I would say that this theme of trust was behind the why. The theme of trust came up in so many conversations that even in our organization, it's like one of our top goals. How do we create trust on the teams between each other and stuff inside the tool? I do these little cartoons sometimes for talks, but I think one of the things trust is if you put yourself in the shoes of an engineer, you can imagine what they think of us. So this is what they think of us. So literally, they are being measured. Their velocity is being measured. Their points are being measured. The number of stories they crank through. Their burn downs always look really nice. Their test coverage is being measured. Their defect rates. Their budget versus actual cost. How many tests are passing, failing. They generate reports every single day that tell them this stuff. Their cumulative flow chart. What's their whip? And this is kind of what they think of us. Like, they think that often this room, as product managers, just people, as a bunch of talking heads just talking about their ideas and stuff. So some empathy in that direction is good, because if that's how they perceive us, and literally a quote that I've had is, I'm being measured every day. How about your passing test? How about your passing test, product person, in that case? And that was really meant a lot to me. They had a point. What's my passing test? And when a engineer, their test coverage goes down, they laugh about it and they work harder on it. That's a high trust environment. For product, our passing test sometimes feels like the end of our project, right? It feels like there's a lot of salience to go on that. So these are some of the learn quotes that came out, and the first one was great. Is a rapidly growing company, so they took me aside and said, just between you and me, there aren't really any open questions at the moment. None. We have to execute and we have to move quickly, and yes, I'm absolutely giving them a solution in that case. So at that point, and I think that everyone in the room can relate to a point where you're just like, just ship it. Please, just ship it. Come on now, this is not Einstein work right now. We need to ship software to do that thing. This was a quote from a founding team, which was fascinating to me. Do you think the code is a thing? That it has value, really? I don't think so. It's what this founding team has learned over the last 4 and hard years. You can't quantify it. We could tear the stack down, the technical stack, whatever. We could tear the stack down and start over. And that's a fascinating quote around learning, because what your team has learned and what the data is trying to help them learn in this particular case is often the most valuable thing that you're going to learn in this particular situation. And it's easy to think it's about the technology at the moment, but think about all the talks earlier on today that people, I worked at a feature in my previous company that we were working on a feature that a competitor worked on in 1995. I found a Google post about common area maintenance costs or something like that from 1995 from a competitor. And so all that learning is taking place. It's pretty fascinating when you think of what you're doing as collective learning. And I like this one too, because I think a lot of this stuff, as much as I'm an addict for this lean startup stuff and things, but I have to admit sometimes all I hear all day is experiment, hypothesis, and assumption. And I think we're bastardizing these words. This isn't science, this is shipping software. And I think that it's meaningful to me because I think sometimes if you just boil it down, like what do we have to learn today? Again, I'm thinking like Jim's talk, like there's some things that we have to learn and we're gonna go and ask people questions. And that's data too. It's absolutely data. It's qualitative data that you're feeding into the system. If you start phrasing your efforts as what do we have to learn today instead of, well, I read Lean Startup and we have firmly stated our hypothesis and then, maybe that's overkill for this. If you just boil it down to what do we need to learn today? What's the most important thing we need to learn? It basically encapsulates 95% of the lean startup movement without having to use those particular words, which can honestly, if you have people on your team who were postdoc students and they hear you start saying the word hypothesis and experiment and assumption, they're going to kind of laugh at you. For most of us, we're shipping, kudos to the people who make medical equipment where it really matters if the thing goes down. Most of us in the room, does anyone do medical equipment where someone will die if their product fails? Okay. So the obstacles there, one of the classic ones is I kept hearing about relearning and rework. The amount of collective learning that your organization loses because it keeps track of it and it never does that. So I've worked with Jim tangentially in the past. The way I know Jim is because I've listened to many, many, many interviews Jim has done because someone dutifully put them on the wiki and put them there and tagged them and let me go back and learn them. One of the greatest obstacles, again, in thinking about data is running the same report again for the millionth time, a different way, or going back and asking people, like, hey, how many people are using Chrome again? Like you're losing that information. So the amount of relearning and rework that goes on, so figuring out as a team how you want to capture your learning. Stories and rituals are an important way to capture the learning, but imagine someone joining your company. How will they get the learning when you do it? And you can't even begin to learn new things if you haven't learned from it. The other one is the zombie feature problem. And a lot of times, so we're pitching in our product the ability to track these features. What do you know about the features you shipped last quarter? And I just call it the user story black hole. I mean, literally, it's this place. It's a place that the user stories go. They go there to die in this place. They become features in your product. And the number of zombie features you have, again, it's letting these features become zombies is an anti-pattern. And you hear it over and over with these particular teams. The teams that are doing the best know exactly what they've shipped over these last quarters and are keeping track of how they're doing. They don't let their features become Walking Dead zombies, right, to do this. The other thing that happens a lot is the perfect planning, right? That the perfect plan is this idea that learning stops once the perfect plan has been established. And at that point, when teams would come to me like, well, we really should start using some data to figure this out, I would ask them, do you actually think that we're going to change direction? So I had a moment in my career when I was facilitating an exercise for a group of engineers and a product owner. And I asked them all to silently write on a piece of paper why we're in the room at this particular moment. And one engineer wrote, we're here to decide whether to kill this feature. Whether the data says we should kill this feature. It's an open question. And the product manager said, I'm here to decide whether to ship it this week or next week. Right? So, no, I mean literally. And so what I'm saying about this perfect plan aspect is that that's sort of one of these anti-patterns when people talk about the data fully up front, fully to validate, and forget about using as this feedback mechanism. It's a little bit like the zombie feature thing. So again, this is weird maybe to talk about in the context of data, but when you instill curiosity with your team, when that becomes a company culture thing to be curious and to chase out what's going on, that manifests itself in the use of data and the use of things with your particular project. If curiosity is a company value and learning is a company value, and you instill it and your leaders continue to promote that, it manifests itself in what you're doing. It's pretty amazing. The stories you tell about how you maybe effectively use data to deliver a better customer outcome. The teams that were great at this just told me stories. They had specific examples. We did this, and then we measured this, and then 6 months later, we just got rid of the feature. And it was awesome, and we removed debt from the product. The people who are just using this very aspirationally, we gotta be doing this data thing or something like that, they never have the stories. The story is always about some tool they've purchased or something, you know, or some guy who knows how to write Python scripts, and it's like the 1 PM who can do that. And they all have to ask them for reports or something. So they're curious. The other thing is, and I think that this is very important with the learning thing, again, I'm just harping on Jim's talk because it was just recently, is the data side, a data scientist told me you can basically solve almost all data science problems with linear regression and clean your data. And you spend 95% of your time cleaning data. Posing good questions to which you can aim the data at is a talent and it's a skill, and you have to teach your teams how to do that. And I just worked with a data scientist who just was running through the data for a couple weeks, and he came out and he was doing his particular job, and he said, well, it turns out the people who are not active in the product are more likely to churn. I was like, that's super interesting. I got it, like, job well done. But we need to ask better questions here. So I would sort of urge you to work with your cross-functional teams to learn how to ask better questions and learn just basic problem solving. People often ask me, should we get stats training, or should we do? There's so many tools in the Bay Area that companies like myself and others are making. My company, it is a buyer's market. Let me put it that way. There's tons of good tools. I don't know how many of us will still we're just going to get knocked out. But there's lots of tools that can answer these questions that you have, right? If you don't have the question, you're not going to get a lot out of the tool. And then the final thing is allowing your teams to share what they learn. Some of the most powerful meetings I've been in is when a team stands in front of a larger team and talks about what they learned. We learned that the customer did this. And so one very actionable thing you can do is to, Agile has these retrospectives and things like that, but get a team of 8 people in front of a team of 100 people and have them talk about what they learned and show it and demonstrate it with data, both qualitatively and quantitatively about what they did. And it has a profound impact on what you're doing. So I think a lot of us are actually in this situation. So this is my I call it the learning debt rocket ship. And so do I have the pointer? Yeah, well, whatever. So it starts with a great idea, and we validate the pain, and then we talk to them, and then we sell, and build, and hurry. Then you start to scale, and things get scale, and then the intuition kicks in, because we still have really good intuition, and we're hurrying, executing, and then you hit this spot. Like, oh shit, it doesn't seem like it's working anymore. Like, literally, we missed a quarter. It has to be something like that. It has to be something that shakes the company to its core. And you kind of have a choice at this point. Either you kind of go down here, so it ends with another miss, debt, learning debt, tech debt. You start siloing, you start building more feature soup. You try to, you do all these features to try to move the needle. You restructure. You bring in consultants. That's really good. And then people hit LinkedIn, and that's where it goes downhill. And so what I would urge you is where and I put it. And the reason why I say it's learning debt is that. If you stop, anyone who says, well, it's data debt, someone in the BI department will be like, I'm working furiously on making Salesforce talk to the other system. If you talk about learning debt, like our company has learning debt right now, it actually, has resonance, right? It's not just something that can be solved with that. So the thing is, wherever you are in this particular thing, you have an opportunity at that point not to do that. So, the end result is LinkedIn, right? You're looking for a job. And then you're hiring people or I've been in the past, or other people, the consultants come in, and then the consultants tell the people in the company exactly what they were already doing but hadn't had buy-in to do. And then they leave because they're so offended that the consultants are right, and then they've been saying this for 3 years, so it all goes down, right? So try to avoid this. So ritual, what I've noticed about the teams that are incredibly good at this is they build ritual. It's extremely important. So here's someone talking about it. It's just ad hoc queries for right now. When someone needs something, they have to run the reports. I'm always asking engineers about SQL. Like I hear SQL come up all the time. It's like SQL is this magical thing. It's not too hard, but it's like someone is running these reports. And like I told this the other day. So I had an engineer that I worked with who put a rear view mirror on their monitor, and I was sure that they had a headphone rule that like if you have headphones on as an engineer, you can't bother them. And I would see them like I'm sneaking up to go to tap on his shoulder to run the query for me, and they would see me in the rearview mirror, and then they would put the headphones on. So it's kind of, like that's, running the reports. And here's some of like the positive patterns. We share our findings on Thursdays, like a big show and tell. Again, here's the trust. It was rocky at first because some people were new to doing this type of analysis, but we learned quickly it makes it more routine. It's all about practice, right? It's all about practice. So in this particular thing, they actually would have teams who had never really done analysis of data just start, present, like do something for 10 minutes, take a small step, try to bring the data in and talk about what you're seeing. This one, I have no idea where to start, to be honest. Each time feels like a restart, new questions, new metrics. I get the idea, but it just doesn't seem feasible. I have a day job. That's a PM. So ostensibly the day job is shipping software and doing these things. This thing in teams that I've worked on where every time it's a new affair, right? It's a new affair. Like, do we have to pull in this one person, data scientist person, and what's the data we're talking about and doing these things? There's so much weight, right, on that team. But imagine if that team met every 2 weeks and presented findings to each other. It just becomes a practice. It becomes something they do. So one of the big obstacles is this, similar to what Marty Kagan put up, is this scrum fall thing, which is in scrum fall, you're not really using the agile rituals in a way they were meant to be. It's just pretty much let's worry a ton about what it is, let's plan ahead, and then we'll try to execute it. So that takes the ritual out of it. So you do the ritual at first, but then once you're shipping the project, there's no way to inspect and adapt on what you're doing in the product. The other thing is the famous one is the listen for. So as PMs, we really know how to use the word the listen for. So the listen for is a good technique. So when someone on your team says, is it working? You just say, I think I'm going to listen for that. I'm going to listen for that. And somehow you listen for it, but you never have that conversation again. So they just think that this is going into the black hole. The other thing is reporting. If you think about what you're doing is reporting has connotations about what you're doing. You're reporting to someone. And in my experience, the reporting side really, we have some customers who say, yeah, I use your product every 2 weeks, prepare my official report to the VP of product to do these particular things. They're just doing it alone. It's not the team doing it together or inspecting and adapting on what they're doing. It's just someone reporting to their manager to do that. The big catalysts here are, again, this idea of show and tell. Like, what did we learn today? So I have done things with teams where we put all the feedback on little stickies up on a board. And each day they would come in and check it out. So we're looking at this qualitative feedback. The second part is the cadence that the people who are really successful with this tell me something like, we do this every 2 weeks. We do this every week. We go and check the monitors. So when you build an analytics product, you're doing well when someone puts it up on the monitors, right? And a question from Jim's thing is, what would it take to get our product up on the monitors? Because when it's on the monitors, it means that people are looking at it and caring about it every day. So in the past, like New Relic is an example of a product that I've used that was on the monitor in every single engineering team's bay. It's genius. It was part of the cadence. It was part of the ritual. And that sort of ties into this idea of information radiators and other things like that, where on the walls here in Hulu do we see something that every team member can put their head into? And it can be low tech. It can literally be like someone drawing something, hopefully up and to the right, maybe, unless it's your expenses or something. The concept of access comes up a lot when you're selling these types of things. But some of the quotes were great because they reflect the economic time team. So we had to downsize a bit. Not cool, but because of that, small groups of us got together and started learning more, the basics really, and we had relied on someone else previously. So you see this a lot in organizations where you either have data science teams or other BI teams. Those become the other people, the other resource that you do it, and you never really have access to the data, right? It's some other person doing it. So this team was great. They basically formed study groups to work better with data. And they did that, and they would meet all the time. This one was great. The product team doesn't want us to have a login. It's like they want to own Mixpanel. Only they can run reports. No joke. That was where it was. So the product team was basically like, they're gonna go, maybe not in their words, they're gonna go rogue. Like someone would go rogue if they got this data. Like we have to kind of control this a little bit here. Things are gonna get out of hand. This one is one of the best stories, and it shows about access. So I was talking the other day to an intern at one of our customers, and someone had connected us. Actually, in this case, I put these little banners in our own app that say, like, I want to talk to you, it's John. Just schedule something on my calendar. And they go in and they book it. So that's how I book my interviews. So out of the blue, I get this request to do an interview with this someone who said that she's an intern at this company. So I'm just an intern. I'm doing an MBA, and I'm not a data scientist. But for some reason, they gave me the keys to all of this data. I used some tools from my school at the time, Ivy League school, and figured out some key predictors of churn and success. I feel kind of bad for the people who never get that freedom in the company to do that. So that's how profound access to data in your organization can be if it's accessible. Here is like an MBA student in their internship, and you know how internships are. You're usually like, well, yeah, there's this kind of problem we want to figure out. We want to figure out like why people churn from our business, which is basically like one of the biggest problems that the business could have. And they give it to the intern because everyone else is so busy. And the intern is not a data scientist. They just use the right tools, like the tool from their MBA program that lets you find like like predictive features for an algorithm to do it. So that's the power that making tools and data in your organization can be. And also, it'll for tools that don't require an advanced degree in data science or something. So this was a great tool to do it. So in terms of the app, I call it, one of the obstacles, although I like the tools thing, is this tool fetishism, which is you're obsessed with the right tool. And we have customers who've tried like 15 tools. It wasn't right for us. That was not right for us. And then why? It just wasn't right for us. Like we couldn't do that thing. And after 15, you're like, no tool is going to save you at this point. So the tool fetishist actually causes a lot of disruption in their organization because they always are bringing in a new tool. And if you're on your team, you're like, I was talking to a team the other day that had 15 pieces of analytics JavaScript inside their app. And I was like, well, like which one do you use? Well, you know, this team over there is kind of using that one, but it's hard. And this other team did this thing, and it's just amazing. But that's like tools overload, and I just call it tool fetishism that does it. The other big one is data hoarding. And data hoarding is where your particular team, if you're a product team, you hoard some data because you're worried about people going rogue with the data. And all I can say in that particular case is, again, you just have to create that. What is causing you not to trust the people you work with, that if they had access to the data, things would become difficult? And then the final one is this sort of data scientist obsession. I love working with data scientists. I'm sure there's some data scientists here and things like that, but there's this idea that there's this holy grail of people who know how to do things that you do not know how to do. I guarantee you, as I'm quoting back to the data scientists I know, they're like, look, when I'm working for MetLife and I'm trying to like eke out 0.1% of a predictive thing that someone will die, that becomes to be a kind of complicated data science problem. 99% of SaaS business data science problems aren't even data science problems. It's like we phone this stuff in. It's really not difficult. He's like, I like it because I make a lot of money as a consultant, but honestly, just get those tools. So, try not to rely too heavily on those people in your department. See how you can democratize it. So the catalyst that I mentioned here is this study group thing is an awesome idea. Like get groups of people in your organization who want to study and learn more about using data in your organization and let them meet every period of time. The second thing is this idea of explore and exploit. So what I've noticed is teams often misapply methods of data analysis based on where the project is at. You're exploring, so you're capturing data with a wide net, and then you're exploiting that information in terms of a solution that you're putting into a market. Both of them take vastly different data, like analytics approach to do that, and people often misapply. So really making it clear with your team when you're looking to explore and cast a wide net versus exploit the data you have. And then finally, this theme where you'll see this out is the democratized data. When I'm probably running way over. Okay. Hold on. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, kind of. I'm going to go through more quickly. This one, again, we had so much learning, so many interviews and stuff, and then some good data and made the effort as a whole team, but suddenly we stopped. Everyone was kind of pissed. Why didn't we act on it? Again, this idea of action. In a lot of environments, I'll talk to someone who'll be like, well, we really should be looking at the data. Why? We should be. We should totally be looking at data. Like, what decision do you have to make based on this particular piece of data? Well, if I find something, translation, if I find something that like bolsters my project or something like that, then maybe we can do particular data. So agreeing with your team about how you want to act on the information that you gather and what are the boundaries for acting on it is critical for doing that. I feel like we're looking for a needle in a haystack, and meanwhile we have everyday questions that need answers. Why does it need to be this big deal? Again, everyday answers lead to small incremental improvements in your product that add value to your product. There's this idea that there is a holy grail answer that will change your whole business if you figured out this particular problem. There are some of those questions, but in general, the everyday questions can have everyday answers with data and then allow your team to move forward. And then I love this one. This is like the no drama team. Teams know that you'll never get it right the first time. We just accept that. The drive is to keep moving the needle, and we mostly just let people do that until it stops working, or maybe it never worked to begin with. So again, it's this bias to action in what they're doing and safety in that. So the obstacles there is one thing I call the feature factory, which is the feature factory has nothing to do with acting on data. So if you are in a feature factory mode with your business at the moment, just don't worry about it. Don't waste time. Don't waste time poring over data or like trying to go and run your ad hoc reports. You're not going to act on it. You're not acting on it. You don't even know the features you released a quarter ago. You're not going to act on it. Just don't worry about it. Give yourself some, like leave work at 5 or something. The other thing is this obstacle of the product owner is the owner of the data and the owner of the decisions. Marty sort of spoke to that there, that's kind of a hoarding of information. It very rarely works out. And a big thing with this action is the get ahead of it thing. I love the validation techniques that people spoke about, but sometimes you see massive plans and cases put forward for projects. Again, it leaves no room for flexibility if you get new information. So some of the catalysts in this regard are thinking in terms of missions and outcomes. You hear the words missions, outcomes a lot. A lot of these conversations, I get all my interviews transcribed. So then I can go into Google Docs and search for words, like how many times did people use outcome, how many people. It's actually an awesome way to engage your team, and it's because you can read a transcript in 5 or 10 minutes, which takes 60 minutes to listen to. So it's an effective technique. And one of these things, I spoke to someone earlier about this exercise called Design a Dashboard. I started doing that actually with some people in the room, and then I've since gotten better at facilitating this, but you basically have the team design a dashboard for a project and design the presentation that they hope to give back to the team in 3 months. And it's kind of a profound exercise if you think about it. Instead of being well, maybe in 3 months we might talk about whether we learned something, you actually decide ahead of time about what your current state is and what you would hope to report back to the organization. So I think it was, I forget her name, but someone from Design Map, we were talking about this exercise. You could tack this onto your design studios or other things that you do in the beginning of a project because it grounds your project. And then the team holds on to it for 3 months and tracks it. And they put the numbers in from the beginning and then wait. And then it's really fun when they put the new numbers in. And it's a great way to align the particular team. So this kind of goes to Marty's stuff. I won't go back into it, but this is sort of this scrum fall thing that's happening you see on a lot of teams. And again, this is the we will listen for feedback. So basically, feature A starts, you plan, build, build, build. Feature B is starting, you start planning, you're shipping, you're building, you're building, you're planning, you're planning. And then some PM is measure, measure, I have my day job, I can't keep track of this, I've got 3 features to think about. Can I see this particular thing? So the goal really is something more like this, which is building, shipping, learning, and measuring as a constant, right? If you take this is what the Agile was all about, or this is what Lean was all about. This, as Marty pointed out, is just another form of waterfall. It looks like a waterfall, right? It is literally like a waterfall. These are streams of stuff that you're doing. The final thing I wanted to end on is safety. The what? It's okay, what?
No, we're all trying to take a picture.
Yeah, here, take it.
Take a picture.
So again, this starts with a powerful mission. And so I say that measurement and learning happens continuously and not sporadically. to be able to do that. So again, you get this idea of here, let's get ahead of the next project. If you're in UX, that happens a lot. Like someone will say, I really need to get ahead of that. I need to get ahead of that. And invariably, you get way too far ahead of it. And that's kind of how it's going. But again, like I'm trying to show it, we're all PMs, and this sometimes you fall into this without even the best intentions to do what Marty Kagan said, and then you just end up doing this. And that's what life's about, right? You just have to keep working on it. The final topic is safety. And I love this quote, there is a certain vulnerability to all this. And that's a good word for it. It was kind of easier before when we build what they asked for, and then they took responsibility for it. And now it's on our watch. And what if it fucks up? And this was said by an engineer, and it's kind of a fascinating way to think about it. Like this engineer is basically saying, I kind of liked it how it was before. They would dream it up, and then we would build it, and job well done if we delivered it. And now I'm hearing people go to ProductCamp LA, and they come back. They've got these like newfangled techniques that they're trying to throw on me. And it seems to have flipped this all around now. And now it's our problem. Like what's this empowerment thing all about? So that again comes to safety. Like you need safety as a team to work through that thinking. I know a lot of people where the product team is the most sort of forward thinking, and they go into their meetings like, I really wish we could get this way to work, and the engineering team isn't up to speed. And then the flip side where the engineering team is actually perfectly willing to go this way, and the product team is lagging. And this, so it works from both directions. And this one was great. The problem with experiments is that our experiments would never fail. Experiment was another word for do what I say. So having that new, it's awesome. Having the new, this is great. So they had a new VP come in. So having the new VP here made so much difference. We're not pushing hard enough unless we mess some things up. And I mean, I can't, that's why I say that these don't even bother with those words if things aren't kind of blowing up every once in a while. Because you're not pushing it hard enough. The binary search algorithm works on the fact that there's failures. You're not iterating your way to anything if you hit the first thing and experiment successful. A lot of people, describe MVPs as basically do what I say because it's an experiment. It's a good PM technique too, if you want to demoralize people. The next thing is the problem with experiments is that our experiments, okay, so I learned some stats and I totally botched up a test completely, but it was okay, the world didn't end. Again, like I'm trying to reinforce that the world won't end if you make some kind of analysis as a PM, and no one raised their hands when I said they're making life critical health equipment. So, that's a good thing to go on. And then, so finishing off, the big obstacle there, one thing that really makes engineers mad is success theater. It's just there's something about it and their mindset that success theater drives them absolutely crazy. So success theater is the thing where there's a lot of rah-rah about a particular feature, and the people closest to the feature know it kind of screwed up. And there's nothing that says no safety in this situation more than success theater. It's really, really difficult for some engineers to understand. The other one is to penalize people for bad things. And then this other concept of the inmates running the asylum. We can't have all the engineers, the inmates running the asylum. I probably have different sort of opinions than some people on that, but just the thought itself that you've got all these sort of rash people working that you need to monitor can be a little poisonous. So finally, the catalyst. So celebrate learning, one team, all data. So the whole team is engaging with a particular data. And then finally, setting an example with your leadership that there's safety there. I mean, nothing says that more than a senior product person talking about a mistake they made, maybe with analyzing the data, and then saying, well, I went back and I checked the data out with the help of you guys, and it turns out that we moved in the wrong direction. That is one of the most powerful things that you can say to your team that changes the safety zone in your particular organization. So I wanted to finish, like, any questions or discussion topics. Yeah.
Yeah. So I manage a group of product managers.
Yeah.
When in SEO, the hard thing with SEO has always been you don't have control of all the variables. And inevitably what happens, for good or for bad, which is a lot of legit, people will say, well, Google changed your algorithm, or there's all these factors that are out of my control, and it's not so easy to be as scientific as it is for traditional product managers. So
Yeah.
this goes back to data. How do you give me tips for that in terms of?
Well, I think that part of it is just doing exactly what you did, is sort of acknowledging like the problems faced.
Question.
Oh, sorry, let me repeat that. So I think if I'm summarizing is, you can be in some domains where, because SEO is his example, where other people are doing things that you might not, it's a sort of chaotic situation, and you can't come to an answer in that situation. It's difficult to be able to come to an answer. Is that generally like a good
Yeah, and I've actually had one case where the SEO manager was patting himself on the back, sending an email out to how great he did. He really didn't do anything. Google changed something, and 2 weeks back, 2 weeks later, Google fixed it, whatever happened, and went back to what it was before, and he was really under the limelight. So I think it does point to a larger issue of a lot of variables aren't in your control.
Yeah, and I would say that to that is I know it sounds like simple advice, but just acknowledging the vicissitudes of your domain, right? Like that's, if you're in that particular thing, like that team might, here's the way to turn around. What do we need to learn about? We need to learn how to get better numbers. You know, if that's important for your business, if it's truly important for your business to be one step ahead of Google and to understand what's going on in a differentiator, creating an environment where your screw-ups were actually the first little bits of learning to do it. If it doesn't really make a difference for what you're doing, that would be another question. So I think acknowledging just how weird your environment is. And certainly, when you start looking at data for the first time, your first stab is always wrong, pretty much. You're always getting something wrong. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
How do you transcribe your interviews? You said you transcribe them.
Oh, yeah. I use a company called Rev.com. It's $1 a minute. They turn it around in 24 hours. Completely worth it. If you think about, let's say everyone's $100 an hour, and you want 20 people to be able to read something and comment, it's $2,000, and now everyone can read it in 1/6 to 1/8 of the time and comment. You lose a little bit of the personal angle, like hearing their voice and stuff, but what you lose there, you gain by having things. And then you can search it. It becomes another data source, whereas before it would just be like a wrap-up deck or something. Go ahead.
Great.
Recommend Dragon Naturally Speaking as a cost-effective measure versus a transcriber that you're paying $1 a minute?
So someone mentioned, it's called Dragons. What's the?
Dragon Naturally Speaking, and a lot of attorneys use it.
I have a feeling that the people I'm paying $1 a minute actually use it. So I'm going to just suspend reality for a second, and then yes, there are probably much better tools that aren't $1 a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
What I was hearing in your talk is a lot about trust and safety, and that's more of an organizational and cultural issue.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to tie in how your research on how data affects organizations ties into that, and if it can actually affect trust and safety.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant question. So the question was, can this work in reverse? Can data actually impact, if trust and safety can affect how data is used, can data also be able work in the other direction? I would say things like if there's data available to everyone, I think that the democratization of data in a particular organization has the impact in reverse, right? It allows people to create that trust and safety to be able to do it. If data is not clean and it's not sort of thought through about how it's done that, it has the opposite effect, right? Like if everyone's running different reports and everyone comes up with a different number, I mean, I've been in situations where everyone was writing ad hoc queries to answer the same question and everyone's getting different numbers to do those things. I think it has the reverse effect to be able to do it. And I also think that, again, if data is used as the club, this was the team that was right and this was the team that was wrong, I think that has the net effect of reducing the level of trust and safety in the organization. Any other questions? I think you're good. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
A lot of what you're describing was qualitative data about your quantitative data research.
Yeah.
And how you use one or the other, what's the different situation?
So the question is the use of qualitative versus quantitative data. And honestly, I don't, day to day, there's the right tool for the job, right? I mean, I just don't make that distinction. There's ways to turn qualitative data into quantitative data too. If you're working on things, there's natural language processing. There's other things you can do. I've worked with teams that tag the particular pieces of feedback. Tagging is actually a great method that turns it into quantitative data to do that. I think that, yeah, when to use each is sort of beyond the scope of this particular thing, but I would say, in general, people underestimate qualitative data now. Unless it's like these, I mean, I say that in terms of, unless it's the hippo's opinion or something like that, right? Like that qualitative data counts, right? Because it's their opinion. But I would say I've been getting more and more back into qualitative data after being heavily involved in quantitative data.
Hey, everybody.
Time,
We're gonna call time. So thank you very much to
sure.
John.